The day my family disowned me, they did it politely. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just calm voices, forced smiles, and words that cut deeper than anger ever could. They said it was about responsibility. About standards. About how my financial struggles embarrassed them. What they really meant was simple. I was poor. And poor people were disposable. I stood in my childhood living room while they explained why I no longer fit into their lives. My mother avoided my eyes. My father spoke like he was reading a script he had practiced for weeks. My siblings stayed quiet, relieved it was not happening to them. They told me not to come back until I had something to show for myself. So I left. Not with rage. Not with promises. Just with a silence that scared even me. The years that followed were brutal. I worked jobs no one in my family would have acknowledged. I slept in places they would have been ashamed to name. I learned how quickly respect disappears when money does. And I learned something else. People who abandon you when you have nothing never expect you to survive without them. I rebuilt quietly. Slowly. With discipline and resentment fueling every decision. I changed cities. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped hoping they would notice. They did not. Until one phone call shattered everything. It came late one night from a number I had not seen in years. My sister's voice sounded unfamiliar. Thin. Nervous. She did not ask how I was. She did not apologize. She asked for help. I almost laughed. Because the same family that erased me for being poor was now desperate enough to come crawling back. And whatever disaster had forced them to call me meant one thing. The power had finally shifted. And they had no idea what it would cost them. What they revealed on that call exposed a secret so damaging it explained why they had no one else left to turn to. The call did not start with the truth. It never does. My sister spoke carefully, choosing words like they were fragile glass. She said there had been a misunderstanding. That the family was going through a difficult phase. That things had gotten complicated very fast. I listened without interrupting, already sensing how bad it had to be for her pride to crack first. Then she said my father's name. His business was failing. Not struggling. Failing. The same business they once used to measure everyone's worth. The same one they praised at family dinners while reminding me I was nothing without success. Loans had stacked up. Investors were pulling out. Someone had made a mistake that could not be undone. They needed cash. Immediately. And somehow, in their desperation, they remembered me. I asked one question. Why me? There was a pause on the line. Not long, but long enough to hear the truth breathing underneath. She said I was the only one not already tangled in their mess. The only one without shared liability. The only one who could move quietly. I told her I would think about it. That night, memories came flooding back. My father telling relatives I was lazy. My mother explaining my absence as a phase she hoped would pass quietly. My siblings posting celebrations I was never invited to. I remembered every detail because pain has perfect memory. I did not sleep. The next morning, I did something I had not done in years. I searched their names. Court records. Business filings. Lawsuits. What I found was worse than they admitted. This was not a temporary crisis. This was collapse. And buried deep inside the paperwork was a detail that changed everything. My name. They had used it years ago. Signed documents on my behalf when I was barely surviving. Loans I never agreed to. Guarantees I never authorized. They disowned me publicly but used me privately. That was when I understood why they sounded afraid. They were not asking for help. They were running out of places to hide. What I decided to do with that information would force my family to face consequences they never imagined. The moment I realized my family had committed fraud in my name, the past finally made sense. Every sudden decision. Every rushed signature they brushed off as a formality. Every time they told me not to worry about details because they were handling everything. They had not just erased me from their lives. They had used me as a shield. I did not confront them right away. Fear makes people careless, and I needed them careless. Instead, I called my sister back and told her I was open to helping, but only if I understood everything. I asked for documents. Full access. Transparency. She agreed too quickly. Within hours, files started arriving. Contracts. Loan agreements. Guarantees tied to businesses I had never stepped foot in. My name appeared again and again, written with confidence, forged with certainty. They never expected me to check. I spent the night cross-referencing signatures, timelines, and witnesses. The more I uncovered, the heavier the silence around me grew. This was not desperation. This was premeditated survival at my expense. The next day, my father called. His voice carried authority out of habit, not power. He spoke about family duty, about mistakes made under pressure, about how helping them now could make everything go away. He did not apologize. He negotiated. That was when I knew they still saw me as disposable. I told him I needed time. I told him I was considering my options. He reminded me of everything they had given me growing up, as if love was a loan I had defaulted on. After the call, I met with a lawyer. Not a dramatic meeting, a precise one. She listened quietly, then explained exactly how exposed they were. Criminal charges, civil liability, prison if the wrong person discovered what they had done. And I was the wrong person. I walked out of that office with two things: legal clarity and a choice. Help them bury the truth, or let the truth bury them. I did not decide yet, but they could feel the shift. Because for the first time in my life, my family was afraid of me. The conditions I set next would push them to a breaking point they could not recover from. I made my conditions simple and impossible at the same time. I told them I would consider helping only if everything came into the open. Full financial records. Every account. Every transaction. No omissions. No explanations yet. Just facts. I wanted to see the entire picture before making any move. They hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. My mother called next. Her tone was softer than my father's, but the manipulation was sharper. She spoke about family loyalty, about forgiveness, about how people make mistakes when they are scared. She never mentioned the years they left me alone. I reminded her of the day they disowned me. She said that was different. That circumstances had changed. They had. I was no longer powerless. Reluctantly, they agreed to my terms. Over the next few days, I received access to accounts I was never supposed to see. Offshore transfers, shell companies, cash movements disguised as expenses. It was far bigger than I imagined. This was not just a failing business. This was a slow-burning collapse held together by lies. Every new document tightened the knot around them. I watched as panic crept into their voices during our calls. They started asking when I would step in, when I would make things right. I did not answer. Instead, I prepared quietly. I updated my lawyer. I secured my own assets. I documented everything with timestamps they could not dispute. Each step felt surgical, not emotional. Then I made my next move. I asked for a family meeting. In person. The same living room where they once erased me from their lives. They agreed immediately, relief leaking through their fear. They thought this was reconciliation. They thought I was coming home. They were wrong. What I revealed during that meeting would make them beg for mercy they never offered me. I arrived at the house early. Not because I was eager, but because I needed to feel the space again. The walls had not changed. The furniture was newer, more expensive, but the judgment in the air felt exactly the same. This was where they decided I was no longer worth keeping. They gathered slowly. My parents first. Then my siblings. Each one looked at me like I was a stranger who somehow knew all their secrets. No hugs. No warmth. Just expectation. They wanted relief. I let them talk. My father outlined the situation like a business proposal. Numbers. Deadlines. Consequences if creditors did not calm down. My mother watched me closely, waiting for signs of softness. My siblings avoided my eyes. When they finished, the room went quiet. I asked one question. Why did you use my name? No one answered. I repeated it slower. This time, my sister broke. She said they did not think it would matter. That I was already gone. That using my name was easier than finding another solution. Easier. That word echoed louder than any apology could have. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of every document they had shared with me. Highlighted. Indexed. Organized better than they had ever managed. I watched color drain from their faces as they flipped through pages they hoped I had not understood. I told them I had options. I could help restructure debt, negotiate quietly, protect them from immediate collapse. Or I could step away and let the consequences unfold exactly as the law intended. Their breathing changed. My father's confidence finally cracked. Then I added one more detail. Any help would come with conditions. Permanent ones. And if they refused, I would not intervene at all. The silence that followed was not fear. It was realization. They finally understood they were not in control anymore. The conditions I demanded next would force them to choose between survival and their pride. I did not rush into explaining the conditions. I let the silence do the work first. They sat there, waiting, measuring how much dignity they could afford to lose. My father's hands trembled slightly. My mother folded and unfolded her fingers like she was praying for a different outcome. My siblings watched the door more than they watched me. That told me everything. I told them I would step in financially, but not as family. As an authority. Every asset would be audited. Every account monitored. No transaction without my approval. They would sign documents acknowledging the misuse of my identity and transferring control of the business to me until all liabilities were cleared. My father tried to object. He said I was humiliating him. I reminded him humiliation was temporary. Prison was not. That ended the discussion. My mother asked if this would stay private. She was still worried about appearances. I told her the truth was already written. I was simply deciding how fast it would be read. They agreed. Not because they trusted me, but because they had no alternative left. Over the next weeks, I took control quietly. I spoke to creditors. I renegotiated terms. I stabilized what could be saved and let the rest collapse without dragging my name down with it. Every decision was documented. Every movement traceable. They started treating me differently. Carefully. Respectfully. Like someone who could end them with a single call. My siblings asked for advice now. My father asked for permission. My mother asked for reassurance I never gave. They were surviving. But survival is not forgiveness. And just when they thought the worst was behind them, I prepared the final step. What I revealed next would change our family forever and leave them begging for something money could not buy. They thought control meant safety. That was their mistake. Once the business stabilized and the immediate threats faded, something shifted in the house. My parents slept better. My siblings laughed again. They started acting like this was temporary. Like eventually I would hand everything back and quietly step out of their lives the way I once had. They forgot who saved them. I called another family meeting. This time, they arrived confident. Almost relaxed. My father even thanked me, using a tone that suggested closure. My mother spoke about healing. About starting fresh. My siblings nodded along, already planning futures that depended on my silence. I let them finish. Then I placed a single document on the table. A formal legal statement. Signed. Notarized. Filed. I told them that during my review of the finances, I had discovered more than fraud. I found evidence of intentional concealment that placed full liability on specific individuals. Not the company. Not the family. Them. Their faces froze. I explained calmly that I had two options. I could submit this information to authorities and fully separate myself, permanently. Or I could keep it sealed under one condition. Complete disassociation. No shared name. No public connection. No inheritance expectations. No future claims on my life, my money, or my success. Legally enforced. Irreversible. My mother broke first. She asked if this meant losing me forever. I said they lost me years ago. This was just paperwork catching up to reality. My father stared at the document like it was a verdict. He knew I was not bluffing. He knew how carefully I had played everything so far. Pride did not matter anymore. They signed. Every one of them. Not because they wanted to. Because they had to. As I walked out of that house for the last time, I felt no triumph. Just clarity. They survived because I allowed it. But they would never touch my life again. The final outcome proved that being disowned for being poor was the best thing that ever happened to me. I did not hear from them again. Not immediately. Not later. Not even when the business finally sold for less than half of what it once was worth. The legal separation I enforced did exactly what it was designed to do. It erased me from their narrative while protecting me from their consequences. For the first time, their survival no longer depended on me. And my freedom no longer depended on them. Months passed. Then a year. I built a life they knew nothing about. A career born from struggle, not inheritance. A home filled with calm instead of judgment. I stopped measuring my worth through their approval because I finally understood something they never did. I was never poor. I was unsupported. The truth surfaced quietly, as it always does. Whispers in extended family circles. Subtle distancing. Invitations that never reached my parents anymore. People learned enough to stay cautious without knowing everything. Reputation does not need exposure to decay. One afternoon, I received a message from a relative I barely remembered. She said my mother had been asking about me. Not to reconnect. To ask if I would reconsider the separation. If I would forgive. I did not respond. Forgiveness was never the reward. Independence was. The final twist came when I was invited to speak at a regional business conference. My story of rebuilding from nothing resonated with people who had been dismissed, just like I once was. The applause was real. Earned. Somewhere in that crowd, a journalist recognized my last name and asked if I was related to my father. I said no. And that was the truth. They disowned me for being poor. Now they live with the knowledge that the one person who could have saved them, protected them, and carried their legacy chose peace instead. That choice destroyed them far more completely than anger ever could. And I walked away whole.